Anyhow, my name is Doug Manley, and I'm a part-time judge in a variety of courts. We're talking about municipal courts tonight, so we'll sort of ignore county court, but that's, of course, where I spend more time. I was looking at the list here. Bond is where I've been municipal judge the longest. Los Animas, Swain, Rocky Ford, maybe only for a few more days. Manzanola, Ordway, but we could add to the list right now Sugar City, Nolde Springs, too. So, variety of places. Basically, Colorado, like cities and towns, want to have a municipal court to handle things locally. It happens within the city or town limits, and it has to be a violation of an ordinance that the council's adopted, and they're only allowed to do ordinances for certain things. Certain misdemeanors, certain traffic charges, really about almost any type of traffic except DUI or anything that has to do with licensing the driver of the car. States and federal ordinances get to deal with those. And then what we call regulatory or code violations, which is what a lot of the little towns there do. The HUNA covers all the categories, but a lot of them do just the code violations because nobody had ever handled that in the state and courts. And those are the things that make it a better community, make it a little safer, a little healthier. That's the things like animal control, weed ordinances, fire hazards, junk vehicles, maybe kids out after curfew, litter, putting up a sloppy fence that didn't meet the building code or zoning. I get a variety of those things in different towns that I go to. And a lot of them really are safety issues, trying to get rid of rodents, trying to get rid of fire hazards, trying to keep property values up, make the town look good. So a lot of times when we handle those cases at court, we're really just trying to get compliance. The state authorizes penalties, could include fines, of course. Depending on the court, maybe jail sentences, but most of the municipal courts, unless it's the very large ones like Aurora or Lakewood or so on, are getting away from jail sentences, because if you do that, you've got to have jury trials available. You may have to have a public defender if somebody can't afford their lawyer. If there's any risk at all of going to jail. So most municipal courts have gone to more of an infraction procedure, sort of like if you got a ticket at the state patrol out on the highway, a mail-in ticket. And that's what we're handling most of them. We'd say we've decriminalized the cases, and they have their own procedure. The officer presents the case, usually, not the city attorney, although he'd be our equivalent of a DA. They still have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt if there's a dispute. The defendant still has the right to remain silent. We still ask them to enter a plea to get the case going. But no jail time, no jury trials, no public defenders. You can hire your own lawyer if you want. Yeah, and most of the cases don't even involve lawyers. So that's sort of what a municipal court is. And if you read in the news about other states, it's going to throw you off. Like in California, they'll have something they would call municipal court, and each town, but it's part of the state court system, and it's a whole lot more like what we call county court. So different states can set up their own court system, which I think is the next slide here. All right, so this would tell you a little bit about how the courts in Colorado are organized. What we're talking about tonight is this little box all by itself down here. If you remember back to your high school civics days, we've got three branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. They really call it the judicial branch. Make a big deal about it. So the judicial branch in Colorado, we have, of course, the Supreme Court, and under that we have the Court of Appeals, and then we have various districts. Right now we have 22, soon to be 23 districts in Colorado, and they group together one or more counties depending on the population, the area, and so on. We happen to live in district number 16. That's Crowley, Otero, and Beck counties. And we have 2 district judges. They're full-time, and they will travel to all 3 counties. Now, about 70% of the cases are in Otero County, so that's where they are most of the time. But at least one day a week, one of them is going to one of the other counties also to take care of their court business. Under that, that's the trial court that could do anything. Under that, though, we have county courts. The state constitution says we've got to have a county court in every county in the state. And that's a limited court. That's where you're going to get your traffic tickets, misdemeanors, small claims, collection cases as long as they're under $25,000, evictions, civil protection orders, name changes, also the type of thing that the average citizen, if they're going to court, unless it's jury duty, most likely it's going to be county court that they see. because populations vary and caseloads vary. You know, I'm a county judge, that's only 85% time. That's why I'm allowed to do some of these other courts and a few other miscellaneous things as a lawyer. Go to Bubba, I think they have 3 full-time judges just for county court. Denver has about 20 or 22 of them, so it just depends on what you have to do. And then we're back to the municipal courts, and again back to each town whether or not they want one. I'm trying to think, I think I don't know about Bend County, but otherwise Crowley and Otero County, I think every town has one, but most of them are limited to those code violations. I hit next, I think. Okay. I'm not doing well.
That's okay.
It's not working. I only use PowerPoint a couple times a year, and usually it's the one at the academy, and their clicker works different.
Yeah, just
Keep
click
that
this
towards
one,
the
don't
screen.
click that one.
Just this one?
Yeah, just that one. That one will do that next.
All right.
Whatever.
So some of this may repeat as we see what comes up on the screens here. Okay, I said cities and towns can have their own municipal court to handle local matters, and there's a lot of overlap between what happens in county court and what happens in municipal court. And when Judge Wadley was the county judge before me, but I was already the Lahana City judge, we could compare notes a lot of times with, oh yeah, we saw some of the same people for various issues from time to time. The appeals go to the state court system. When the city council, if they decide to have a municipal court, sets it up, there's 2 ways they can do it. They can have it a court of record, a court not of record. Court of record, you've got to have some way to keep a verbatim what happened, usually tape recording. If it's a court of record, so you know exactly what happened in a trial, then if there's an appeal, it goes to district court. That's just like what you think of a normal appeal from the state courts. People write briefs, they get a transcript of what was said, and so on. There's no more new evidence. Except, again, most of the people don't have a lawyer, so they're trying to figure out how to do that. If it's a court not of record, which is most of the municipal courts, especially in this area, means we're not keeping a tape recording of what happened in the court. Somebody decides to appeal, it goes to county court, and you get a whole new trial. Now, because I'm a part-time county judge, obviously that means we've got to get a different judge to come in and handle it if there's an appeal from municipal court. Quite frankly, I can't remember the last time there was an appeal from any of the municipal courts, but it's happened a couple of times. I'm going to see if we've got this down. All right. And that's true that, again, about record and not of record, and how the appeals go. A court of record could do a restraining order. I don't think we want to do those in our part-time courts around here anyhow. But you could do a protection order. It's got to be a court of record because you've got to know what the restraining order provides, and you've got to be able to get into the CBI system for law enforcement to check if there's a restraining order, is it still valid, what were the provisions. But that also means if they're violating that restraining order, maybe coming back to municipal court. Well, that's okay if it's a full-time court, but not for a part-time court. It doesn't work real well. You know, Lahana, yeah, I've got court every week, but some of those other towns that are on that list, once a month for Rocky Ford and Mansonola and Ordway, Swink and Los Animas will call me if they need a court session this month. May not even be every month. So that doesn't work real well. Now, bigger cities, yeah, but not for us. Oops, I hit the wrong one again. So there we've got our criminal or decriminalized matters. This is why we've tried to expand Lahana Municipal Court, because of all the advantages that we think for the citizens and for the police department. We get to things faster. We handle juveniles. Now, not serious juvenile delinquency matters, but you know, if the juvenile is shoplifting at Walmart, got into a fight at the middle school, something like that, instead of having to file all the reports with the DA and file a delinquency procedure, wait for them to file the case, and then get the kid and his parents served, you can write him a ticket, municipal court. Now, if it's a problem maker, no. But if it's just a kid thing, you can do that. You can get them into court. You can get it done quicker. When you see the kids come, you have to bring a parent, and you can sort of tell which are going to be the problems and which not. There are some kids that are so glad court's over because their parents have been on them so bad ever since they got the ticket. They just want to get it done. Or they have the kids that show up, big brother comes, oh, well, parents can be here. Yeah, right, no, come back with your parents, you got to tell them. And then you get the ones with the parents that are arguing how the police did everything wrong. You know there's going to be a problem with that family for years to come. But we do handle it. And as a result, for La Junta, we've set up some alternative sentencings also, community service, especially for juveniles. Traffic cases, defensive driving classes. So we do have some alternatives that we can do. When they first started doing juveniles in La Junta, we thought that this was going to be like the high school boys, you know, they're getting into a fight or something. Middle school girls, a lot more of them when it comes down to the fights. And not as many shopliftings as we thought. And of course, we get the traffic tickets. We get some other miscellaneous things as well. There are some cases like, you get unfortunately a lot of shopliftings at Walmart. Probably a lot goes on at Safeway and Love's, but because they don't hire security officers per se, they don't catch as many. But we get a lot of those. We get a lot of people come down from Pueblo in December to do their Christmas shoplifting. And police department tries to keep track if we've seen these people before or not. The first time, yeah, let's write to municipal court. Let's get this over and done with quickly. If they recognize them as a repeat offender, they can still write it to county court, where we've got more options, including the possibility of a jail sentence. They just need to make sure that gets in the reports going to the DA that they know it's not a first-time offender. So the police department has those options. But that helps them, simplifies things. I said they don't have to do as many reports. We can get to it quicker, usually within weeks of when they wrote the ticket. These are some of the decisions. Some of that's true about county court also, but it says that most people have their contact through the municipal courts. The municipal courts and to some extent county courts, these are more the people's courts where you just deal with your average citizen, not your hardened criminal. And when we're at municipal court, we're not wanting to offend the citizens. We're not wanting to accuse them all of being bad people. The Junta municipal courts City Council made the decision they want an afternoon and an evening session each week to try to accommodate people's work schedules, school schedules. You know, if you're working during the day, you don't have to take off work. You can come to an evening session at court. We don't have to pull kids out of school to come to court. They can come in the evening after school. Or sometimes you get some of the people that are in the alternative school that maybe afternoon is a better time for them. But we still have to go through all the formalities of legal rights and due process, but we don't have to be real adversarial or aggressive about it. There's ways to try to explain the whole court system. And that's been sort of my thought as judge, that most people don't get a whole lot of exposure. You get told a little bit about the judicial branch of government in a civics class, but not really how it functions. Or you don't remember some of the details till it's real life for you and you're there. And so a lot of it is trying to explain to people what we do, why we do it, why we have some of the laws. You look at some of those code violations and people wonder, you know, why did the city council adopt this law? Well, there are reasons for a lot of those, but you have to sort of know what the health and safety reasons are. Or last night I had Rocky Ford municipal court session, and the defendant was upset that he got a ticket for junk vehicle when his neighbor didn't get one. At least as far as he knows, his neighbor didn't. I don't think he would know one way or the other. But you know, why does one person get a ticket and not another? Well, maybe the other person did, or maybe the police just can't get hold of everybody, or maybe the other person was more cooperative on trying to take care of the problem. There's reasons. That's back to the police department and their prosecutorial discretion on deciding, do we give a warning, do we give a ticket? My role as judge is, did it happen or not? And in his case, it did. Maybe other people did. Maybe they should have gotten a ticket also. But that doesn't mean it's all right for you to go out and violate the law. But most people aren't that adversarial. Let's see, anything else to talk about? Well, proximity to the police department, in our case, usually we're right there in the city building, so yeah, we're real close to all the officers when we need them. Now that sounds impressive till you know what the requirements are to be a county judge in a Class D county. Colorado has Class A, B, C, and D counties. And it's based on population strictly. To be a county judge in a Class D county, that's state level, you've got to be a high school graduate or have your GED and not have a felony on your record. Okay, that's not a real high standard. It doesn't require any legal training. The state has gone to the point now that if you're not a lawyer, you do have to go through their new judge training before you can get sworn in, but they don't even require that for municipal courts. It is up to each city council, if they're going to have a municipal court, to decide what qualifications they want. Lahana is a home rule city, so we have a city charter. That's like our city constitution. And then the ordinances are like the city laws. Lahana does not have any, well, in fact, none of the towns around here have any specific requirements for judge. At one time, Lahana City Council said their preference was an attorney that lived in the city. Number two, if they can't do that, an attorney at least that lives somewhere that will come to the city. Number three, on the list was, well, we can't get that, let's at least get a citizen that lives in the city that we think is qualified, and if they can't even get that applied, then they would look for a citizen outside the city. So Lahana City Council at least gives priority to having a lawyer if possible, and then they give a little bit of priority to somebody that's actually part of the community. County court, you gotta live in the county where you're the county judge. District court, you gotta live somewhere in that district. The whole idea is that you should be there in the community, know a little bit more about the community, about the people there. At state level, you're gonna vote on whether or not to keep you in office every so many years. City council, our city judges, no, not so much. It's up to the town council. Usually there's a term, but there's to make sure that the council's not interfering with the judges, make sure that we're keeping this fair and independent. Once they hire a judge, unless there's some good cause, they can't get rid of the judge during the term. You can't just say, well, we don't like how the judge ruled last Wednesday night, so we're going to fire him and get a different judge instead because we don't like those outcomes in court. Or we don't think the judge is imposing enough fines, so let's get a different judge that'll do higher fines. No, that isn't how it works. And the courts really, yeah, I get fines are a way of penalty. If they happen to generate enough to help the city pay the cost of having a court, that's fine. But that's not why the municipal court's there. We're not there to make money for the city. Many years, the Lahana court balances out, about comes out even. Some of the other small towns, because we want to get compliance more so than fines. I mean, if your dog got out and didn't have a license, we'd rather pay the money to get a license than to pay a fine and still have an unlicensed dog. So there's some of those cases where if we get compliance, the city may not be collecting much of anything, but we got the problem taken care of. And that's going to be a whole lot safer in the future. If the dog gets out, we know it's had its rabies vaccination now. We know whose dog it is to try to get hold of them. Problems with weeds, let's get those done before they spread. We'd rather have you go hire somebody to cut them down if need be versus a fine. A lot of the code regulations we can handle that way, and that's the preference. And so some of the small towns, I'm not even sure they're breaking even on the fines, but we're trying to take care of problems in the community. Now there are some of the cities in Colorado, the big ones, that may put some requirements on the judge, and they have adopted some of the state legal ethics rules also for their local judges, or even have local commissions to help review things. Some of the town councils want to meet every once in a while with the judges to get a report about what's going on, or when they get new council members, make sure everybody understands how the court works. Some don't worry about that. It's just sort of a little corner of city government that is there, and sometimes I think they sort of forget about us. We just do our thing and try to take care of it, and it doesn't involve very much by way of personnel. We involve the law enforcement officers for the community. The reason it says in Class C and D counties that you can be both a municipal judge and county judge, which is me, because none of them are full-time positions. Class C and D counties are part-time judges at the state level also, ranging anywhere from 20 to 90% time. Right now I'm classified as 85% time with the state. That's fluctuated over the years, anywhere from 90 down to 75, 80, 85. It's been all over the place, but right now it's 85. So you can do both. That's why there's some advantages, I guess, of knowing everybody and having the same judge. Maybe you still have to know the municipal court rules. Colorado Supreme Court, even though we're not part of the state court system, still has some authority over all municipal courts. There are a standard set of municipal court rules of procedure the Colorado Supreme Court has adopted. The state constitution says they have authority to adopt court rules, and they've done so. You can do local court rules if you want. They have to be approved by the Colorado Supreme Court. La Junta has done some. I did some years ago. None of the other towns around here have their own local ones, and probably no particular need for it. The state ones take care of most of it. Got to know what the city ordinances are. And what's interesting in some of these towns is some of those ordinances have been there for decades. Every once in a while it makes some recommendations to the town council or city attorney. Maybe you want to look at updating some of these. They don't work real well, or we need a better definition, or years ago they said you can't really prosecute much for loitering anymore, or if you're trying to have harassment or disorderly conduct, could we try to make them parallel to the state laws and be easier to know what the definitions are, and the officers don't have to remember two sets of rules depending whether they're writing it in city court or state court. So that comes up periodically. Obviously, you got to know rules of evidence, and you got to know how to interpret some of this. It's one thing to sort of look at the rules in the book, and it's another thing to know how they're actually applied in real life. There is a Municipal Judges Association in Colorado, and they have a long weekend training twice a year. And I've gone to many of those over the years, not as many since I became county judge, because I go to the state trainings also. And separately, there's a Municipal Court Administrators Association for the court clerks, and they have an annual conference also, and also separately put on some training sessions. And if you ask them, they'll come out and do what they call an audit of your local court, basically looking at your procedures, your forms, your supplies, everything, and make suggestions on how you can improve them. And we've taken advantage of all of that in La Junta. Okay, there's our municipal court rules of procedure. Okay, when it's talking about guidance in the state statutes, that's sometimes you're trying to figure out what a definition is or how it applies in real life. And many, not so much the code violations, but the traffic violations, the misdemeanors, most of them have a similar provision in the state law. So you could look up in the state statute book and see if somewhere along the way the Colorado Supreme Court or Colorado Court of Appeals has had a case where they had to interpret the same thing. Figure, well, okay, it's not technically, it wasn't our appellate court, but hey, they're in our state, they're interpreting the same language in another body. Why can't we, by analogy, use their explanation and definition to help sort of fill out and supplement our interpretation of our local ordinance law? And that helps a lot sometimes. Constitutional protections still apply, absolutely. This is where you get into your due process rules. A person is always entitled to hire an attorney, where we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, about the right to remain silent. Search and seizure rules still apply. You can't just go violate somebody's rights because you're going to charge them in municipal court instead of the state courts. That doesn't work. I guess you could say there's limits on cruel and unusual punishment, but I don't think we have anything in municipal court that comes close to that. But I guess in theory it still applies. One segment when I'm teaching at the Law Enforcement Academy at Otero College is when we talk about constitutional violations. Okay, everybody review civics. When we go through the Bill of Rights, everybody remember what Amendment 1 covers, what does Amendment 2 cover, and so on, down the list, and examples of what not to do as a law enforcement officer in the courts so that you don't violate those. You know, we still have speedy trial rules. Our court sessions have to be in public, just like any other court. not closed to anybody. It's open session. People can come watch. They don't very often get spectators, but they do periodically. There's a couple that was at Rocky Ford last night that they've come a couple times to watch. They're retired and apparently have an interest in local government. They live in Rocky Ford, but they've been going to council meetings. They've come now a couple months in a row to watch the court. They were over here in Lahana a few weeks ago when we had the public hearing about the council member. They were in the audience that night, and then they wanted to visit with me about some of it last night to make sure they understood a little bit more about how the courts work and how the municipal courts work. So they got sort of an abbreviated version of what you guys are getting tonight on the road. To start a case in municipal court, it is possible that an officer can request a warrant. Sometimes that happens. Mostly it's because they know who they want. They can't find the person, or maybe they live out of town. Somebody was shoplifting, but they live in another community. They, rather than get in a high-speed chase with somebody on a traffic charge and looting, if they knew who it was, fine, just let them go. We'll get a warrant and get them later. That's a good, safe rule. So, but most cases start by writing a ticket. Now, we would call it a summons and complaint, but that's how you start the case. If you look at the fine print, these are public matters. So it will say the people of the state of Colorado through the city of Lahana, or the people of the city of Lahana in small print versus, and write in your name in big letters. And everybody just looks and sees their name on there, but technically it does say that. It's the people versus whoever. They have to include an approximate date and time. They have to include approximate location. Those are important. A couple reasons. What if the person has an alibi? They got to know when you're accused of doing this. What if they've had a similar charge before? We want to make sure we haven't violated one of those constitutional rules about double jeopardy, that this isn't overlapping with the case they had before. We've got to know the times separately. Last night, the officer in Rocky Ford had to amend their summons and complaint because they wrote the wrong street name down. I think that was going to be the defendant's defense, that it wasn't even on that street, but the officer realized it when they went back to look over the scene and amended the ticket before the trial started. But those all apply. You have to give the law number that you're violating. So for municipal court, what ordinance did they violate? And if there's different ways to do it, like different ways of disorderly conduct, you got to put it in subsections so we know what we're talking about. And the law says you got to give a brief description. And it's really brief on a ticket. If you ever got a speeding ticket, it'll just say speeding 67 and a 55. That counts as a brief description. Tickets for municipal court could be speeding ticket, or disorderly conduct, or petty theft, or dog at large, or something like that. But at least have some idea what they're accused of, enough so that if I'm going to do a trial, I know what they got to prove, and I can look it up in the ordinance book. And a copy of the ordinance book has to be available at the city hall, that people can come in and look themselves there, or at the library, to see what exactly it says. And so they've got to know what to look at also. And they are entitled to get a copy of any police reports ahead of time also, or photographs, or any evidence that police have. They can be charged a photocopy fee, but that's it. You still can get a copy of all that information to prepare for trial. We can still issue subpoenas for defendants to bring in witnesses if they need, for somebody to get off work, out of school, or just because they don't want to come, but now they get the court order that they got to be there. Our starting point. It's called an arraignment there, or it may be called sometimes the first appearance. This is the first time in court. At that hearing, I'm going to go over with everybody what the legal rights are that apply to this type of case. Municipal court, I'm probably going to explain a little bit about municipal courts, like I did with you guys too, as to where do they come from, that we're not part of the state court system, what type of cases we're handling there. Legal rights, we've covered it one way or the other already here tonight, that you have the right to remain silent, they got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, you've got a right to trial, and I'll go over what the options are. In a lot of municipal court, if it's a traffic charge, we have a chart that city attorneys put together based on what you're accused of, what we know of your driving record, and how old you are. Meaning, are you a kid or are you an adult? Here's what we can offer for settlement. Are you eligible for deferment? Are you eligible to have the points reduced? Or say, too bad, we tried to give you a break before, now you're back again, you're on your own. Or of course you can always go to trial or you can plead guilty. Now, misdemeanors, the code violations, the options are our city attorney will come once a month and we'll meet with people informally at a pretrial conference and discuss the case, and maybe they can work out a settlement or compromise. If so, they'll do that paperwork. Or, of course, you could plead guilty, we'll figure out the sentencing, or you can come back for trial. Usually the tickets get to court within the first month. That already is faster than the state courts, because the state courts are usually at least 60 days before the first appearance shows up. And in Lawton right now, we're running trial dates within a month after that if you request a trial. And we'll give you your option if you want the afternoon or the evening session. So again, that's another way that we've sped things up. Now, some of the other towns where we only have court once a month, and the speedy trial rule is 90 days. Can't get to it quite that fast, but you get your choice if it's once a month. You get your choice the next month and the month after. We're still within speedy trial. That's as far out as we can go. One of the next two court sessions, they happen to be once a month. Rocky Ford, last Monday of the month. Ordway, second Friday of the month. So, pretrial conferences when they'd be meeting with the prosecutor. And La Junta's the only city of the courts that I go to that actually has that process. But since you guys are mostly interested in how La Junta works, that's it. The other towns, a little bit smaller. If there's a lawyer involved, the city attorney might get involved talking to the lawyer, but otherwise they're not. If we had a jury, it works. You can request 6, but if you don't know that requester, it's a jury of 3. We did a jury call once in La Junta, and they settled. And I did a jury once in Sugar City, and it was just a jury of 3. That was before they built the new municipal building over there. They had a room in the back of the fire garage that was council met, the court met, so that's where our trial was. The hard part of the municipal jury trial is where do you get your jury panel? It's got to be citizens that live within the communities, within the city limits, and it's got to be randomly selected. The 2 times we've done a jury call that I've been involved in, the state court clerk for the local county was nice and gave us one of their lists they have for emergency calls as far as names of jurors, and then we went through that and picked out the ones that had addresses within the city limits, and then we had to generate our own forms. We couldn't use the state jury commissioner, but that was our way of getting at least a random list of people and making sure that they lived within the community. Of course, now that we decriminalized these in most of the towns around here, we don't have jury trials anymore, so that's not an issue. So also took that line item out of the budget. I had to put in there every year just in case that we had to send out jury summonses, hire a bailiff, and so on, that we had a little money set aside. Don't need to do that now. And it's also meant we've cut our line item for jail. A couple of the very, very large municipal courts like Aurora or Denver have their own city jail. Most places do not. We have a contract in theory, the Otero Sheriff, they never have room, they're outsourcing their prisoners. We have a contract with Bent County, and we have used that periodically in the past, but they're sort of crowded right now because of all of the Otero prisoners being housed down there while they're rebuilding the Otero County Jail. We don't do jail sentences though as penalties anymore either when we decriminalized it. So the only time anybody's getting arrested for municipal court is they didn't show up. And we've got to go try to find them and get them there to court. And quite frankly, most of the ones I'm getting right now, they got arrested for something else at the state level, and when everybody looked in the computer said, oh, you've got to work for city court also. Then they got to post bond for both cases. All right, well, we're back to the types of cases again. So code violations, animal control, curfew, trash litter, watering restrictions. When watering restrictions are in effect in La Junta, you get a lot of tickets for people watering outside the right time limits. There are a few miscellaneous things. They don't seem very often, but once in a while, business doesn't do their sales tax. Somebody's going door to door, soliciting, selling things, didn't get a city license. There are a few that come up with that, or tampering with your electric meter. That comes up every once in a while. Somebody tampering with the electric meter, basically trying to tap in and either change it or plug in and get some free electricity.
Or water.
So, and we have cases for that every so often. They're very hard to figure out the restitution because you don't know how much they stole, but we get some of those cases. And then, like I said, speeding. A lot of times the police department will do patrols in the school zones at the beginning of the school year. And up around the high school, towards the end of the school year, around the stop signs when the students start getting maybe a little rambunctious up there. Unsafe backing. There used to be an anomaly in the state traffic code that some of the traffic laws apply anywhere in the state, whether it's in a parking lot or on a street. Some of them only apply if you're on a public street. And it used to be that careless driving applied anywhere, but unsafe backing did not. So now what do you do if you had an accident in the Safeway or Walmart parking lot? You hated to write a ticket for careless driving. That's a lot more serious, and it looks bad to the insurance companies, but you couldn't write an unsafe backing ticket. Well, they changed the law. You can now. So we do get those. And misdemeanors, you have fights, shoplifting, harassment. Those are the most common, not domestic violence. A couple of reasons. First of all, domestic violence is a mandatory arrest. Okay, go back to having to have a jail available. Second, it's a mandatory protection order. We don't want to be doing the protection orders and having to enforce them in municipal court. And third, if you're convicted, it's mandatory to do an evaluation and see about treatment program first. And again, we don't have those resources. A lot of alternatives for sentencing in Lahaina, but not domestic violence. Leave that over to the state court. Okay, this part is a little bit old. Our fines are 0 to 2,000 possibility in Lahaina. Say, do we ever give anybody a $2,000 fine? Never. It never even used to be that high. But there is some sort of environmental regulation that had something to do with a grant or a program the city was doing that the federal government said you have to be able to give fines up to $2,000 if they violate this. So we had to have the city council amend the ordinances to say we could, in theory, do a fine up to $2,000 so they could proceed with whatever they were doing with the federal government. They've never written one of those tickets, never done a fine that high, but in theory it could be. If we had not decriminalized, 0 to 180 days is a possibility. In-home detention, everybody knows how that works? This is where you have the ankle monitor and connect to the phone and tell you you got to stay home in lieu of going to jail. Okay. The first time we did that with a juvenile court years ago, he was so embarrassed. No, he stayed home. He didn't go to school while he was on the monitor. So we had to change the order that not only you're authorized to go to school and work, if you're a kid, you're required to go to school and then come home again. Learned my lesson on being more specific about my court order. I've tried out these equipments. Community service, we run our own community service program. My court clerk is full-time for Lahaina, and she served a combination of court clerk, community service coordinator, probation officer, and collection specialist. If we were over at the state courts, we'd have separate people doing each of those jobs. But we don't need separate people, but we do have a full-time person at Lahaina. She's there Monday through Thursdays, 8 to 5 except lunch. Fridays, 8 to 12, because she has to come in Wednesday nights when we have our night court session, so that's how we make up for it and keep it under the 40 hours a week. Traffic school, mostly online anymore. When I first moved down here and with the DA's office years ago, actually had live traffic schools. You can go into your defensive driving school. Most of them are online anymore. With little nifty names, remember, go to trafficschool.com or something like that. So if you broke a window, if you stole somebody's stuff and weren't able to give it back, if you were shoplifting, if there was a fight, medical bills, we do charge restitution also. Okay, Lahaina Municipal Court. This is getting down to the specifics. This is not every municipal court, but this is Lahaina. We're not the court of record. We do not worry about tape recording the proceedings. We do handle juveniles. We do have a contract with the sheriff to rent jail space, but we don't use it very often. And we meet every week, late afternoon meeting Wednesdays, 4 o'clock, and evening session, 7 o'clock Wednesdays. So if you want to come watch, you can show up at either time. Don't be real late, because if we have a small docket, we'll be done pretty fast. It just sort of varies. Tomorrow afternoon, I think I've only got 4 people at 4 o'clock. Now I've got more like 7 or 8 at the evening session.
What time is the evening?
7 o'clock, 7 p.m. And a couple of those, actually it's that many cases, a couple of people have 2 cases tomorrow evening, so may not be as many people. And not everybody shows, or some people, once they finally get up to the court date, come in earlier in the day, just want to pay their fine and be done with it, and not show up for court. Sometimes somebody wants to change it, so I can't promise everybody to be there. Every once in a while somebody got arrested on a warrant when they didn't show up last time, and so we've added to the docket too. But that's generally how it works. Next week won't have court because court goes on vacation. So, but that would be our upcoming schedule if anybody wants to come watch. That must be it. I've run out of pictures. So, how about questions? Anybody? I gotta get out where the lights are in my eyes. Yeah.
I've been watching the trial of the students that were murdered in Moscow, Idaho.
Uh-huh.
And what is the advantage of waiving your right to a speedy trial?
Probably they want more time to get ready. My main guess. Now, especially in a
But
case.
the defendant gets to decide.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's strictly the defendant's decision. It is a constitutional right that the defendant has.
Okay.
But how they interpret that, it varies a little bit from place to place. In Colorado, the rule is 90 days from when you pled not guilty for municipal courts. State courts, it's 180 days, the more serious charges. But usually it's because they want some more time to investigate and prepare. Now, if you're dealing with a traffic case, you figure they're just stalling and hoping a witness is going to disappear or give up. But more serious case, that would be my guess as to why.
For the attorneys to
Yeah.
prepare their case.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are a couple exceptions. We don't have to worry about mental competency in municipal court, but state courts, for example, you do. So what if a person is just mentally incompetent to even understand the court proceedings? So instead you ship them off for mental health treatment for a while. You get to stop speedy trial from running for a while that's going on. And a lot of people think speedy trial starts when you got the ticket. No, it starts when you go to court and actually enter your not guilty plea. So there's a couple of tricks to that. There's a companion to that about lack of speedy prosecution too, that sometimes what if the prosecution delays on getting the case filed and witnesses start disappearing and they could have gotten sooner. Now eventually hit statute of limitations too, but there is that provision in there also. So,
Thank you.
other questions?